If you have $500 to start collecting or investing, how can you best spend that money? We're going to tell you what we think next on Cards on the Table. Hello, sports card investors, and welcome to another episode of Cards on the Table, where we have some great topics to talk about today, including one suggested by our viewers. Ben, if I were to give you $500 to spend on cards, how would you spend it for collecting or investing? We're gonna talk about that next, but first, welcome to the show. You're filling in for Teapot.
Didn't show up.
His Bucks got beat down so bad. His Milwaukee Bucks, he can't even handle being on the show today.
It's looking grim for Giannis. Doesn't want to show up. Tells us on short notice. What the heck is going on with that guy?
Looking good for Jimmy Butler. Looking good for a lot of your Kentucky guys over here, Doug. You guys are having a good postseason overall.
Yeah, I think we entered the postseason with like 17 former Wildcats in the playoffs, which is pretty nuts. And now Teapot's been cursed by the ghost of Tyler Hero and couldn't make it today.
There you go. Welcome back to the show. So, as I said, one of our users asked the question, if you were starting today and had $500 to start collecting or investing, how would you spend that money? We thought that was a pretty fascinating question. So let's jump right in. Ben, I'm going to go with you first. $500 today, how do you approach it?
Well, we could split this in half. Is it collecting versus investing? If it's collecting, I collect former Syracuse players. I could buy like 700 cards.
Your money can go a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true. That's something seriously to think about, right? Like if you're collecting college cards or guys who aren't top name, $500 can actually go a really long way.
Absolutely. That's what I do. I honestly think I probably have the best collection of former Syracuse players in the world, strictly because I buy a whole bunch of flawless RPAs, National Treasures RPAs, immaculate, stuff like that for 10, 15, 20 bucks a lot of times. But when we're talking about investing, that's where it gets interesting. I'll start off by saying I'm not breaking. I only break with one person, and it's 40 breaks. But other than that, I would not recommend breaking.
Sure, definitely don't do that. Don't even buy boxes and rip them. If you want to do it for fun, great. But if you're actually trying to make some money on it, that's not what you should be doing with your $500.
Exactly. I might suggest potentially buying some sealed wax and sitting on it. Wanted to get in on the Prism Monopoly today, but Panini's website just blew up, and that would have been something that I would have wanted to sit on a little bit. Otherwise, I'm probably going to go with I don't buy in season. NFL season's coming up. I'm probably going to split that money, maybe do one nice PSA 10 slab, and then try to get in on maybe a couple autos of somebody, and then send those off to PSA to have something safe, but also something that if it grades well, I can really maximize that profit.
Okay,
you can do a lot with $500.
Yeah, so get one graded card, get some raw cards, get those graded.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like a little bit of speculating on an upcoming season and what could happen.
And then not getting too crazy. I'm not buying wide receivers, not buying running backs or former Kentucky players or anything like that.
Understandable, especially for football. Understandable. Doug, is this your strategy, or how do you differ here?
I differ in that I am buying wide receivers and I am buying former Kentucky players.
No.
Yeah, I'm buying up every Wan'Dale Robinson right now that's like under $5. So I've got a nice rainbow chase going on for my man Wan'Dale. There's a couple different ways to look at this, right? So if your goal is to make money or if your goal is to not lose money, don't rip packs, don't join breaks. If your goal is entertainment, that's my number one form of entertainment. I love ripping products. So if it's entertainment based, I'm going that direction. But if you're trying to turn that money into more money, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. You can look at it in a safe sense and go vintage, slabbed vintage, something that's not going to see the big peaks and valleys like we have in ultra modern stuff. If you have a little bit more risk tolerance, I would buy raw cards and grade them if you have a good eye for it. If you don't have a good eye for grading, maybe avoid that route because then after grading fees you could really get hurt with some poor grades. But if you have a decent eye for it, buy raw cards, grade those, and flip that direction. But right now, I'm probably looking at really liquid cards in the off-season. Ben mentioned off-season, don't buy during the season. So I'm looking at like PSA 9s of football right now, of quarterbacks. Those tend to be really liquid cards, things that with just a little bit of price movement, you can get rid of pretty quickly. And honestly, even though it's the offseason, football is kind of still on
It's
fire
still
right
been
now.
hot.
Normally we don't heat up.
Jalen Hurts was in the top 5 list this
Oh, yeah.
week, and we're in the middle of the offseason here.
And I'm sure Jordan Love is going to come back up with some recent Rodgers
Aaron
news.
Rodgers cards have obviously been hot. A lot of offseason.
Normally we don't really see that until the National, but football is like heating up really early this
Yeah.
year and staying hot. It's kind of the primary sport even during basketball playoffs. So right now might be the time to look at basketball players that aren't in the playoffs because football's already hot. The playoff guys are going to be the main focus. Baseball is in full swing. So basketball guys, not in the playoffs, PSA 9, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really, really good advice. All throughout there as well. Dollar bins and value bins at card shows and card shops, often a great way to find, cards that you can actually get pretty good deals on. And flipping is alive again. Like flipping was much more difficult in 2021 and 2022 when the overall market was coming down. But there's been a lot of examples of players recently in baseball so far in this short season. Acuna, you've got Ohtani, obviously, who's been going crazy. You got Tatis, who just came back and his cards are hot. And, you saw last football season, Hurts' cards went wild. T-Law's cards went wild. There's many people who saw their cards bump like that. And so flipping is possible if you do what everyone suggested, buy raw and grade, get in on prospects in the offseason who you think could have a good year, hunt those dollar bins for those prospects. There's a lot of things you can do here to make your $500 go a long way. Or, as Ben said and Doug said, you could just buy cards of your favorite player, and if it's not a well-known player, probably goes a long way, that $500. Speaking of going a long way, I went for a value pick this week on pristineauction.com. Tyrese Maxey has a 2020 Hoops rookie ink card on there, a raw card, not very expensive, not a lot of bids on the card right now. Auction ends this weekend on pristineauction.com, but 76ers look like the real deal, Doug, and Tyrese Maxey played well in that first round series against the Nets. I like him. Who are you looking at on Pristine Auction?
Well, I love your pick, Tyrese Maxey, of course. I went a very nostalgic pick. I went with 1983 Wrestling Stars, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. It's a hand-signed card. It's PSA authenticated. I'm not a wrestling guy now, but I was growing up, and I was a huge Jimmy Superfly Snuka fan, and I think I broke one of my teeth trying to imitate him once. So, I saw that, had to have it.
What's your card?
Going classic, all-time great card, 1980 Ricky Henderson, PSA 10, authentic auto, hard signed. It doesn't get much better.
There you go. All these cards right now are available on pristineauction.com. And if you register for pristineauction.com and use promo code SCI when you register, you're going to get $10 free credit towards your first purchase. Let's go into the Data Dive segment. So on the Market Movers YouTube channel this past weekend, Teapot projected who could be the NBA breakout stars for next season. He had names like Darius Garland and Jordan Poole. He mentioned one of your favorites, Desmond Bain, he mentioned him. Tyrese Maxey, who we just spoke about. He mentioned Halliburton quickly for the Knicks. So a lot of different interesting names there, Doug. What are your thoughts? You think he's right on point here? You got others that you got your eye on? Who's going to break out in the card market next season?
I like a couple of his choices. I thought, I like Garland, but I don't know that he hasn't already sort of broken out. That's going to be a good team, a competitive team, and he's going to be a crucial part of that. So I like Garland. I like Halliburton a lot. That's a guy I picked back in January on an episode we did. I love Maxey. We just talked about Maxey. When it comes to a guy like Quickly, who doesn't start and doesn't get a huge workload, who's going to be overshadowed by Brunson right now. That's not a guy I'm looking. I mean, he's got burst potential. We've seen him put up 40-point games and have these weeks of really, high value, but overall, I don't think that's going to be a consistent breakout guy. And then Bain, no. I'm going to lob that one to Ben for Bain later. But I look at a guy like Josh Giddey right now.
Okay.
I think the Thunder are really good and have the potential to stay really good. They're really young. They get Chet Holmgren back. Maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. They've got a million draft picks coming up that they can either use or trade. I love where the Thunder are at, so I like Giddey a lot. He's a triple-double threat constantly. And I like Anthony Edwards a lot. Now, you might think, well, he's already blown up, but I think there's another tier to Anthony Edwards' card market. I think he can be one of the top tier guys. Just from a personality standpoint, a leadership standpoint, a likability standpoint, that converts over to winning. I think Anthony Edwards is one
And
of the
his
big
market's
ones.
fallen.
Yeah, it has.
It has fallen. I mean, he was hot as could be a couple years ago, but it's come down. So That's interesting. Maybe there's a little bit of a buy low opportunity on Anthony Edwards right now. Not as much.
As soon as they're
hype
out of the
about it.
playoffs, probably.
Yeah. You got to wait. I'd even wait maybe a month or two beyond that. You typically see prices in the offseason bottom out a month or two after the player is eliminated. So, yeah, keep an eye on that market. Ben, who are you looking at?
Well, I mean, just looking at what Teapot suggested, I sort of hard disagree with a lot of this stuff. I don't think Garland has already broken out. Jordan Poole has already broken out. Tyrese Halliburton, I do agree with. But I think a lot of people were on him relatively early.
He was hyped all season this year. Halliburton was talked about quite a bit.
And so I do like him overall. Maxey, I'm sort of lukewarm on. Quickly, not a big fan. Desmond Bane, what are we talking about here? You've got Ja Moran and Jaren Jackson Jr. on the same team.
And Dylan Brooks.
And Dylan Brooks. You've got Dylan Brooks. How in that ecosystem can the hobby support the third guy on this team? All I'm saying.
That's got to be the same argument for Jordan Poole then, right?
But I mean, Maxey too.
But Harden's on a short contract.
Yeah, he's on a short contract. And one thing that I'll say is I am pretty conservative when it comes to speculating on these guys. I either want the star player, the absolute star player on these teams, or if you're a championship level team, maybe the second guy. And the example I'll use, and I've used before, Klay Thompson, arguably the second greatest shooter of all time, has 4 titles. And his market is sort of lukewarm.
Yeah.
And he's a likable guy.
At best, really.
He's not likable. He's the most boring guy in the league. Him and Kawhi are the most boring guys of all time.
But if the hobby can't support his market and some of these other guys, then how can it possibly support Desmond Bane? I will double down with Doug and say I do like Josh Giddey. It is sort of like that second guy, so I need to see the Thunder get to that upper echelon, which I do think they can be. I don't think Chet Holmgren's going to play 200 games in the NBA, so not worried about him. But a guy I do like, Banchero. I think he's going to be the superstar in Orlando.
All right, and his cards are down.
Yes,
he was on the cold list this week. He's kind of a little off-season dip right now, early dip for him. So okay, all right. Yeah, you had some big breakout guys this year. Guys like De'Aaron Fox and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will be interesting to see who from this list goes next year. I like Tyrese Maxey. I own some of his cards. I've been a fan of him and the 76ers in general, so it'll be interesting to see where he goes for sure. All right, guys, we got some more great topics to discuss. We'll be right back. All right, guys, go grab Market Movers for free now. Go to sportscardinvestor.com, click Market Movers in the main menu bar to try it free for 7 days, or download the Market Movers app on your phone from your app store and try it free for 7 days as well. Okay, our first mailbag topic of the day, suggested by one of our users: can digital cards ever overtake physical cards in value? Wow, it feels like early 2021, 2022 all over again when there was rampant speculation about NFTs. You had early 2022 was when the NFT market was popping off like crazy. You had Topps and Panini that were releasing all their blockchain stuff in 2021 and 2022. And so much buzz about that. Feels like a lot of that buzz has died down. Certainly the prices of NFTs have died down like crazy. Of course, the prices of physical cards have come down a lot too over the last 2 years. Is there a future in the digital card market? Make sense of this for me, Doug.
Well, as far as the question, will it ever pass the physical collectible? I mean, for me, probably not, unless there's just some crazy utility attached to the digital asset. I mean, we see some of that right now. We see DraftKings Rainmakers or So Rare or Only Gems, where there's competition attached to it, and there's different gamification, things of that nature. So if there's really crazy utility attached to it, maybe. But from a collectible standpoint, it just doesn't do it for me. I mean, there's got to be some sort of path to make them more appealing than they are currently, and it's just not obvious to me what that path would be. So for me, it's physical collectibles, and it's not close, honestly.
Are you in that boat, Ben?
So I agree with Doug. I don't think the digital assets will ever completely overtake the physical assets, but I'm a little more bullish, I think, than most people for a couple reasons. One, we've seen this with a whole bunch of other mediums before. 30 years ago, people are going to say, I'm always going to have my CDs or cassette tapes or vinyl. Music largely went digital. Movies have largely went digital. Things like magazines, what else? Just general books. We look at ebooks. You can't tell me that there's no chance that these types of collectibles go that route. And then the number one reason I'm relatively bullish on this is because the younger generation of collectors have grown up with things like microtransactions in video games, where they're getting like skins for League of Legends or Fortnite or Overwatch or something, and that digital asset is always digital, so the attachment to the physical is less important for a lot of those people. And then, like Doug said, we can have thoughtful utility. Something like Marvel Snap comes out, is a great game for the phone. He and Teapot and I were playing it, and then that has like interesting parallels on these cards that we're even going back and forth. We see in our shop, a cool Venom parallel or something, and we're texting it to each other like, hey, have you gotten this one yet? There is something there. There's like a foundation for it. Does it overtake physical cards? Probably not, but I think like to completely write it off would be silly.
I think you're right on that standpoint, and I own some digital cards and own some NFTs and like experimenting in that space, and I think it may have some future for sure. I think there's definitely something to be said about that, but with physical cards, you have a 70-plus year history of these items being collected and having value, and that's going to be hard to shake. There's been people have collected these items for years, and now you're getting into multiple generations of people who have collected these items and collections being passed down. So it would be hard for digital to overtake physical. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I do think there is forever a role in physical, and therefore the 70-year history makes it a lot more safe. But certainly an interesting conversation. One final note before we move to the next topic. I don't think Fanatics is very cued in on the digital side. They got out of one of their investments, and I think Candy Digital, and so I think they're focused very on physical. And with Fanatics taking over the card market, physical I think is going to rule king for some time.
Yeah.
Second topic suggested by one of our viewers in the YouTube comments was around eye appeal. Is the eye appeal of cards overvalued or undervalued when it comes to determining a card's value, looking at two cards side by side, etc.? Talk to me, Ben, about your thoughts on eye appeal.
So I think it completely comes down to whether or not you're talking about vintage versus ultra modern. When it comes to vintage, I think strictly vintage collectors are absolutely 100% putting a ton of investment into that eye appeal. We see it all the time on like the T206 sets or like the 33 Gaudy sets, where it's cards that come back like 2.5s. They might have the same grade, but the eye appeal is completely different. When it comes to ultra modern stuff, I think it's like vastly overrated, and I wouldn't even know how you necessarily apply that. I was actually sitting there trying to think about, well, what does eye appeal mean for an ultra modern card? Well, we're not thinking about the overall condition that it's kept over 50 or 60 or 70 years. Whatever that is. So is it the parallels? Is it like timeless parallels? Like, are we going to say that the Prism Silver or like a Topps Chrome refractor has great eye appeal? I'm trying to nail down what that actually even means for ultra modern cards.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair question. You agree with Ben's take, or you have a different opinion, Doug?
No, 100% agree with that. I mean, it really boils down to those two markets. It's vintage versus, modern and ultra modern. When it comes to ultra modern cards, we joke a lot about quality control because we have certain expectations, but you compare that to vintage and it's night and day different, how far we've come in quality control. We expect ultra modern cards to be able to get 9s and 10s. We would never hold vintage to that same expectation. So when it comes to vintage and you're shopping in PSA 4s or 4.5, 5, whatever the case may be, then eye appeal becomes what separates those cards. And then it becomes subjective as well, because what creates eye appeal for you? Is it perfect centering? Is that more important to you than beat up corners? Or is it the color of the card? Would you rather have vibrant colors as opposed to something slightly faded, but then you're sacrificing centering? It's all subjective to that point, and then I think there's a lot of room to sort of play around and find stuff that you really like. But then, again, going back to ultra modern, it just has to grade well, because there's no such thing really as eye appeal, especially on chromium cards. You don't have any of the same condition issues that plagues vintage. What's the grade? That's all we care about.
I remember at the National last year, we were hunting around in one of our national videos for 1952 Mickey Mantle, and there was a one that was relatively high graded, like a 5 or 5.5. I think it was a 5 that was being offered for less money than others that we were looking at on the show floor that were graded like even a 3. Yet the 5 looked, even though it was a 5, it looked significantly worse when you looked at it than like the 3s did elsewhere on the show floor. That always stuck with me. It really shows that eye appeal makes a tremendous difference when it comes to vintage, and you can't just buy based on the grade. It's harder, in my opinion, to buy vintage online for that reason.
Yep.
Like
Absolutely.
ultra modern, in my opinion, it's all about the grade. Vintage, in my opinion, It's all about how the card looks in person, and the online photos don't always show that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I've gotten into a little more of the T206 stuff with like teams that went on to become the Braves. Buying online is a nightmare.
Yeah, you never know where you're going to get.
Absolute nightmare.
Never know what you're going to get. Yeah, and that's a great reason to go to the National and all these wonderful card shows that are forthcoming. All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, go check out Market Movers, sportscardinvestor.com. Click Market Movers in the main menu bar. Download the Market Movers app. We appreciate you. Give us a subscribe and a like, and we'll see you for the next one. Take care.